There is an honored tradition in the church, and one that we actually learn even when we're very young, that our prayer can influence God's will. And our prayer of intercession is partially predicated on that. And the tradition holds that God will affect good outcomes in the world based upon what we're asking for. There's some challenges to that theology of prayer, of course. They're evident. First of all, just how much is an all-knowing, all-loving God going to change his mind in accord to our personal wishes? Further complicating is this: if things don't go our way, does that mean that God has turned a deaf ear to us, or that we're praying, somehow not praying correctly or persistently enough? If I prayed for the Cubs and you prayed for the Brewers, who did God listen to? Clearly neither of us. So while this type of prayer is part of our tradition, there are some challenges to it if we take it too far. But an equally honored tradition in the church is that our prayer doesn't change God, but it changes us. When we carve out time in our day to meditate on the scriptures, when we arrange our weekends so that we can come here to Mass, when we offer our prayer before lights out or begin our day with a little prayer, we hold that these prayers enable us to be more responsive, more receptive to whatever it is that we have to face in life. Fasting, pilgrimages, meditation, celebration of the sacraments, they're not meant to change God, they're meant to change us. And even though we might hold that our prayer matters to God, it's more likely that prayer matters more to us. Now, the Israelites, they were very well versed in that first tradition of prayer. When Joshua and his army went against Amalek and his army, they held with their deepest faith, as long as Moses' hands were up in the air, they would win. There was no doubt in their minds that his prayer would affect their winning the battle. Or did they win because from the valley, Joshua and his men could see his hands raised and so believed that God was with them that they were able to find the strength and the courage to win? Did prayer change God, or did prayer change them? In the parable of the persistent widow, Jesus tells us that we need to be persistent in our prayer. That's why he told the parable. But to change the mind of God? Or was he telling us that the virtue, the value of praying persistently is what it does for us? As Jesus says so wisely, would not our loving and just God always desire what is right and good and just? Our prayer becomes boldest and bravest when we are not trying to craft God's will to our will, but when we allow God to recraft us so that we might always believe that we are loved and forgiven, and that forgiving each other is not an option, and that we will have the courage to face whatever it is that we need to face. Our prayer is its boldest and its bravest when we allow God to reshape us so that we might find strength in what we are called to do, and that we don't give up, and that we believe always that our God is with us and for us. That kind of prayer takes persistence. It takes real faith. It's then that we are truly plugging into the power of God at work in us and in our lives. When I was in the seminary, meeting for the very first time with my spiritual director, Father Leroy Kramer, he asked me about my prayer life, and I told him all the prayers I had memorized and offered every morning, about all the people and all the things I prayed for, I so faithfully petitioned God for, and he listened ever so patiently. And then just after a long enough pause to make sure I was listening, gave me the best spiritual advice for prayer that I've ever had. Gary, when do you ever just shut up and listen?